My name is Michael Combs, and I'm the writer and director of Cash and Prizes. I wanted to give you a quick update. We have a mountain of content coming up. We have done some outstanding interviews. I interviewed a veteran who got the first ever 50-50 ordered by a judge in Texas, which is a landmark case. It will open up the floodgates for kids in Texas for equal shared parenting. I hope to have that up very quickly. I have also interviewed philosopher Dr. Tori Evans Barton from the Fatherless Generation Foundation. It is an amazing interview. We talked about the new Jim Crow, suicide, the plantation, the bottom half economically. In addition to that, we spent a week in San Francisco. Our team interviewed Dr. Warren Farrell. It is epic and it will be out imminently. I reshot Dr. Stephen Baskerville, and I will be interviewing Barbara Kay from Canada in a few days. We also will be interviewing Terrence Popp to finalize the interview section to hear MGTOW's perspective. After that, our team at Cash and Prizes will begin writing for the film and hopefully begin shooting in the spring. We have over 30 interviews from experts all over the country that range from judges, lawyers, mediators, psychologists, psychiatrists, legislators, philosophers, doctors, fertility clinics, veterans, and law enforcement. This is huge, and we will incorporate the interviews into the final film. Our website will be up in the next few months, and we are editing like crazy, and hopefully we'll get most of them done by February. As for this video, you will see me in November and December of 2018 at the Child Support Commission of Colorado. We are confronting these people with the reality of the real outcomes of what they're doing. The following are filmed on iPhones deliberately. They are not shot with $100,000 worth of 4K equipment. We don't plan on including any of this in the documentary. We want to document what it's like to confront the systems that are breaking our children. We at Cash and Prizes believe that you can change 1,000 different laws, each of which are a hill to die on. Or you can simply change one that will ease the air out of the balloon over a generation before it pops. We have concluded that every social pathology can be attributed to the absence of implementing equal shared parenting across the board in every state. Thank you, and please donate at gofundme.com/cashandprizesmovie. If you donate $100, we will send you a hat, and if you donate $250, we will send you a shirt. However, details on that will follow after the New Year's. Thank you very much. My name is Michael Combs, and I'm a Denver County resident for over 15 years. My career is in the art direction, and most recently I'm the director of a large film production called Cash and Prizes, Why Marriage is Ending. Our team has flown around the world and the country investigating why birth rates and marriage rates have crashed over the last generation. One startling finding is that 75% of the silent generation was married, while only 50% of Generation X. Millennials at 25%, and Ys are predicted to be at 15%. We have filmed panels of randomly chosen millennials and asked them why they refuse to get married or have children. And they basically say that it is a trap and they don't want to be exploited like countless generations before them. Millennials also ask, why was divorce initiation on parity in 1945? And now, if you're a college-educated woman, you're going to initiate divorce 90% of the time. And if you're non-college educated, you're going to initiate divorce 80% of the time. Why? Cash and prizes, that's why. The money is so good and nothing beats free. We then inquired why older generations do not see this disparity. Millennials responded that they are the most connected generation in history. They are not ignorant because they can read all the government and Pew data online or on social media like YouTube. In addition, millennials emphatically communicate the fact that their brothers, friends, uncles, fathers, grandfathers, and great-grandfathers have all been sharing their stories on social media of MGTOW, men going their own way. And why not to get married and never ever to have children. Why? Because 76% of all children in the United States will at one point enter the child support system. They don't want to subject their children to these terrible life outcomes. They talk about the child support hustle, the gaming of the family court, which is the ultimate representation of male disposability in a culture of female preference. Millennials ask us questions like, why is it if two parents made life decisions for factors of education, debt, they made mindful choices of careers, and both people are above the poverty line, why do we punish mindful parents that spend 20 years to borrow and develop a career, and the other parent is rewarded for not developing theirs? Why can't we live in a meritocracy where everything is based on what you bring to the table and your life choices? Why don't we measure the actual cost of raising a child and say the children are half yours, we are splitting 50-50. And since both of us are above the poverty line, there is no need to exchange money. After all, if you do not qualify for government benefits, why do I have to give you money, or why do I need money from my other partner? We need laws made for 2020 and not 1920. I understand that in 1920, women could not get a decent job or a decent education. Now, 65% of college graduates, 60% of graduate school graduates, the majority of doctors and lawyers graduating are women. In fact, the glass ceiling has been shattered. However, the glass cellar is alive and well. By 2020, women will be the majority breadwinners in married households. A never married woman makes 117% compared to a never married man. Don't believe it? Google debunking the myth of the wage gap, or visit the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Which brings me back to my question. Why is it that when women have a better education, make more money in married households, and make more money as single individuals, why don't we simply split the actual cost of raising the children? And why bother split it all if they're above the poverty line? Since Colorado is a 50-50 state for parental time, effectively, why do you continue to insist on a sliding scale? Why not say you are both above the poverty line, the kids spend half the time with each parent at their home and therefore half the expense? Let's split the cost of healthcare and call it a day. After all, the children are half of your DNA and therefore half of your responsibility. This seems to be the obvious and fair distribution. William Commodore's study, which I have supplied, from UCLA. You can either take a copy there, it's my personal copy, I just didn't print out more, or you can Google it and pull it. It's in legal journals, it's also it's in law libraries. If you contact me, I can get you a copy, or you can simply go on YouTube and look for shocking facts on the child support system exposed by a breakthrough study. The UCLA study concluded that parents with children of the same age and two adults without children earn the same amount with only a marginal increase in cost. The problem with the IE model and the USD model is that the moment you have a child, a third of your home's rent or mortgage do not increase your out-of-pocket expenses. The conclusion of Commodore's study is that having children is a choice, and adults that have children choose to have lower standards of living, and on average, the USDA and the Income Equivalency Group overestimate the cost of raising a child by 200 to 400%. Why does this matter? It matters because this is nothing more than universal basic income for one gender, a neo-Marxist scheme to redistribute wealth from one gender and enable and sanitize the life outcome of another gender. This is about female preference and crying poor for women who make lifestyle choices to these children and to initiate divorce 9 out of 10 times. Why does it also matter? It matters for life outcome for both parents and especially the children. However, more importantly, it matters because men are running away from marriage, because our laws surrounding marriage and children are biased and sexist based on an outdated patriarchal model of male disposability. And that is precisely why the birth rates have plummeted from 3.5 per household in 1970 to 1.8 today, and within 20 years it'll be 1.2. Similar findings are true in Western Europe, South Korea, and Japan, where the birth rates are well below 1. By note, you need to have a 2.1 birth rate for sustainability of your culture. A vote for the status quo and a vote for a cultural shrug is a vote for erasing our civilization and a vote to sustain nearly every social problem we face in America. All of the social science is damning, and you refuse to reform the laws. 65% of homeless are victims of the family court. 60% of suicides are a result of the family court. The war on drugs, the war on poverty, the war on terror, nearly all school shooters. 85% of children with psych disorders, 95% of prisoners, 80% of rapists, 71% of dropouts. These are just a few examples. The best one is that we spend nearly 20% of the federal budget on the fallout from the new Jim Crow and the new triangle trade. When the family court takes away children from fathers, drives them into poverty, and uses patriarchal systems of child support for the best interest of children through racketeering of Title 4D and 4E incentive programs, frankly, you don't understand that Coloradans pay 100 times more to fix the fallout than what Title 4D and 4E brings. In our documentary, we are looking at why MGTOW men are running away from marriage and children. Why? Because they say we have family laws that are exploitative towards men and based in patriarchal systems for male disposability. In addition, we have reached out to many fertility clinics in this process. Colorado and California lead the world in reproductive health. We found that 40% of people leaving fertility clinics were heterosexual couples. 40% of couples leaving clinics were LGBT couples. And 20% were MGTOW men looking to avoid the family court. When you ask these men, they say that in 45 states, a heterosexual woman will get a child 27 days a month, an LGBT couple will get 15 days a month, and a heterosexual man will get 4 days a month. In addition to this theft, the average upper middle class man will spend $500,000 on child support, and a poor man will spend $200,000 on child support on average. Why play the game, just bypass women altogether if they initiate divorce 9 out of 10 times? I can save a fortune and keep my kids 100% of the time, and my children will never suffer the life outcome devastation of this male disposable patriarchal system we live in. Based on these findings, I beg you to consider a simple common sense approach to a world of having a meritocracy of gender equality that is not based on the patriarchy. I implore you to have common sense rules that say if both parents are above the poverty line, then no money should change hands. This will put an end to the majority of every social, economic, and demographic problem we face in America. Down with the patriarchy, down with male disposability, and down with cash and prizes. Thank you. If you're interested in life outcomes for children, please read The Boy Crisis. If you want to know more about male disposability, please consider reading The Myth of Male Power, written by a top 10 global thinker, Dr. Warren Farrell. Here's a copy of The Boy Crisis. Please read it. 1/3 of this book is in notes from every study, every single study. There is zero dispute about this. 50-50 and equal share parenting is the way to go. The reason why child support is bad and changing money is it creates parental alienation, which destroys children's life outcome. Also health outcome. The average child at a time of divorce or separation will have 40% shorter telomere data. That means they will live on average 8 to 12 years shorter than the average citizen and be sicker along the way. If you have any questions, please contact me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. And I'm also a 4D administrator for El Paso and Teller counties in Colorado. That's the child support agency in Colorado. And to my left is Megan.
My name is Megan Loftus. I am an assistant county attorney in Arapahoe County. I do child support services. I'm Kenitha Julian, child support services coordinator.
I'm so sorry. Will you tell me your name again?
It's Kenitha Julian. It's Kennetha. Last name Julien.
Thank you.
Alvin Tafoya, participant.
Yvette Harrison, assistant to the commission.
Elise Topless, state policy performance.
Robert Kurtz, acting advisory and subject matter expert on the guidelines.
Lance Ross, human services director.
Larry Crowder, state senator.
All right, would our guests like to introduce themselves? If it's voluntary, you don't necessarily have to, but if you'd like to, we can go around the room for our guests.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Isaiah McGregory. I am the founder and CEO of a nonprofit organization called Venture Road.
Thank you. Sir, do you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Jason Frazier, just a father of two.
Okay. And
Kiana Robb, a mother of one.
Catherine Robb, mother of four.
Ryan Henry, father of three, and just a concerned citizen.
Sure.
Yeah.
Michael.
My name is Michael Combs. I'm a documentarian. I'm working on a project called Cash and Prizes: Why Marriage is Ending in the West.
Hi, everybody. I'm Laura Thompson. I'm a mediator.
I'm Brian Day. I'm just a local interested in what's going on.
Thank you, everybody, and I really appreciate the public members being here too, because we do appreciate your input. Again, I apologize for it being a short period of time today because it's a short meeting. As far as roster changes go, we are looking for a new accountant because that is a statutorily required position. Our accountant position is open because Shannon submitted her resignation, and so we are waiting for a new appointment for that position. There are certain positions that by statute should be filled by people with certain expertise, and that is one of those. All right, we did receive a copy of the October 29th minutes. I know you probably have not had a chance to completely review them at this point, but if you did by any chance comb through them in the last few minutes, does anyone have any amendments to the minutes? Okay, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes? Okay, any seconds?
I'll second.
Okay, and because we don't have a quorum, we'll have to ratify all of our votes at the next meeting if we do have a quorum at the next meeting. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we have a tentative approval, and then at the next meeting where we have a quorum, we'll just ratify. Okay, now's the public comment section. Let's see, how many people, could you raise your hands if you would like to speak during this 15-minute period? 1, 2, 3, anybody else? Sir, on the phone, would you like to speak?
No, thank you.
Okay, so since there's about 5 minutes apiece, we can go ahead and have the 3 public members present your comments. Michael, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. My team at Cash and Prizes are asking some very simple questions, some next level thinking concepts. Does the system work? Does this system work? Does it cost taxpayers and society more than it brings in? Why are we collecting on private child support since it has zero attachment to 4A, meaning feeding of starving children? It is a false narrative that private payers of child support give our state 4A funding. Why should the taxpayers foot the bill for a government collection agencies? These group of kids will never go hungry. The moms have plenty of money, or the fathers have plenty of money. They have homes, jobs, and cars. Since according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, women constitute 120% of an earned income potential of a man, currently in 2015. The Pew Charitable Trust also says by 2020, of married households, women constitute the majority of earners in those married households. Why does the taxpayer subsidize the legal fees, and in this state, if someone is at fault, their fees can be given to the offender? I would like to see the annual support performance report from 2013 to 2017. Only 2013 was online for the annual child support performance report. Number 1, we want to see the federal law, not the policy. The law that gives the authority to collect private child support, to collect on private child support cases, not the code of federal regulations. We want to see the actual law. If we are worried about having children on poverty because they have low life outcomes, then why, if mom is in poverty, we don't give the children to dad or vice versa? Why? Because we kick a parent out, which is the actual origin of the poverty. We are locking kids into poverty because you incentivize this generational poverty structure. What you are doing constitutes a fraud, essentially, to the people of Colorado. The agency and the courts inflate the welfare rolls by doing exactly this. Number 3, what is the ground total of arrears in Colorado? What is the average per debt per person? Does this include debts from people from 1970? Why do we not forgive arrears like in Ohio? Why do we not give people the right to retire like in the state of Massachusetts? Number 4, what do you do with the money you collect and that is not distributed? In Michigan, it goes to judges. In Texas, it goes to general slush fund for the budget. Why is that money not returned to the person who paid it because it is their money? If it is not used for child support, then it is an illegitimate collection. Number 5, we have seen other states, for every dollar in child support they have chased, they are spending 10 to 20 times in government fees alone, government bills alone to collect it. That's in clear violation of 4D funding requirements. You can only spend a maximum of 25% to chase the child support number. Therefore, you're in jeopardy of losing your 4A funding altogether. Of the public assistance and former public assistance cases, that is number 4, of the money that is owed by 4A, how much money was collected and actually went back to reimburse 4A from this child support? The purpose of child support is to set up a simple collection agency to reimburse 4A. Is this happening and does it work? Number 7, I have given the Commodore report. I will pass it around again. Are you aware that the child support amounts are set too high? The report I talked about last time was very clear. They're set 200 to 400% too high for a myriad of reasons. I have a YouTube video in addition to that on there. You should watch it. Also, every child support commission in all 50 states and the District of Columbia are required by law to know this. If they are setting the laws too high, you're in jeopardy of losing your 4A funding and constitutes a fraud. In Colorado, are you using the Burtson-Roth estimator to create the child support guidelines? Have you done it in the past? Are you still doing it? Number 9, we would like to see every line item that is considered as expense for child support collections. This is not in the reports. We want to see every line item, every pencil, every penny, every computer, everything. We want to make sure that this state is in compliance with the 25% requirement. How many child support enforcement caseworkers are there? What is the total cost of operating the child support magistrate in every county in Colorado? What are the salaries, the staff, the maintenance, the pensions? We would like to see an accounting of that. What is the total downstream cost of the FIDM match? That is the financial institution data match. This is basically a dragnet that scours 40 plus institutions like banks, credit unions, agencies, government agencies, etc. I would like to see a list of every institution that is contacted and the costs for doing so and the database maintenance for doing that as well. Is that included in your child support 4D funding budget? What is the cost of license removal, driver's license, professional license, etc.? I would like to know if you've commissioned a study to see what is the loss of revenue of that payer, loss in tax revenue. What is the downstream loss of the money multiplier effect of that person losing their job from losing their license? Are we taking taxpayers and turning them into receivers, thereby making them dependents? What is the real cost for law enforcement, the motions, the maintenance of buildings, the courts, everything? Are we spending $75,000 a year to incarcerate someone who owes $5,000 of original child support arrears? Oh, and by the way, if you charge 1% of interest per month, you're doubling every 5 years. That means if a person owes 10, he then owes 20 5 years later. He then owes 40, then 80, then 160, then 3, etc. What is the cost for system surfers? Meaning how many programs to mothers or fathers who ride the system? How many are doing it? How many programs are there? I understand that there are 50 to 60 programs that a person can system serve. How many people dip in all of them? How many are we spending in totality for that? That's a huge question. These are next level questions that are hard to answer, but need to be known, especially in a board like this. The bigger question is...
Could you be wrapping up fairly soon?
Yes.
Michael, thank you.
Does the system work? How many cases do you... Here's the big one. How many cases did you refer to contempt of court for non-payment? Of those proceedings, how many did you incarcerate? Of the incarcerations, how many people actually paid? What were the outcomes? Does this work? The poverty rate has increased since the Great Society. The child support system and this entire system constitutes the growth of that. I have left several books for you. The Boy Crisis, The New Jim Crow. If you're a judge, please pick up Divorce Poison or Taken into Custody. Chapter 17 talks about the airtight, all the social science data that says airtight, that 50-50 is the way to go. It is our belief at Cash and Prizes, along with every single social scientist in the country, that all of our social problems, our systemic problems, are born from this very reason. I am not saying return to marriage. I am not saying do that. What I am saying is equal shared custody is a solution for homelessness, for suicide, for school shooters, for a myriad of every social problem we face. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I just want to give you a cite. You said you wanted to know where the federal law is on this.
Yes.
It's Title 42, United States Code, Section 654, and it goes on for several sections after that.
Jeff, a lot of the information he was requesting, he can go to our website and submit an open records request and request that information. So a lot of the things that pertain to the child support division.
Yeah, I'm fairly aware of open records requests. My question is, why are you not asking these questions of people on the board? Why are you not asking? Does this cost more? And the Philadelphia DA that was elected in February is no longer prosecuting child support and marijuana, because what is the logic of prosecuting someone who owes $5,000 and putting them in jail for $75,000, plus court costs, plus law enforcement, everything else? What is the downstream cost of what we're doing? That's the big question. And everybody on this commission needs to know those questions, needs to have the answer.
Thank you. Our next speaker.
I'll go quickly. Just to give you guys some background on me, I'm just a guy who went through a divorce. And I'm 10 years in. I fought all 10 years to be involved in my first child's life. I never missed a payment on child support. Like a lot of fathers, right out of the gate, I had a large chunk of arrears. Those were all paid off. I now have 50-50 custody of my daughter. And I'm still fighting through some of these issues. Now, recently, I had I guess I had $14,000 in overpayment, okay? This was supposed to get sorted out through our last court hearing. Anyway, what ended up happening with that money was they decided they needed to go back and charge me weekly compounding interest on the arrears that I have had paid off for probably 7 years now. And so the state just kept $10,000 or $14,000 of my money and said, oh, it's actually a state statute. We have to charge you that interest. It was never ordered by a judge. I paid it all off. So I'm just wondering, how is the state keeping $10,000 or $14,000 of my money in my daughter's best interest? Because I don't see that it is. And just I on that note, I'm a strong 50-50 shared parenting advocate. I wrote a little something for an event we had at the Holiday Inn here in August. So I just was going to run through this. It should go pretty quick. In modern American society, being a parent in divorce is a scary proposition at best. If you are ignorant of the law, you may come into it thinking that you're going to receive everything, half of everything, including time with your children. This may occur a small percentage of the time if you're lucky. However, if your ex is so inclined to use the family courts to resolve the dissolution of your marriage, you may find yourself fighting for even a small amount of access to your children. According to an article by Beverly Bird, Colorado judges approve this arrangement approximately 20% of the time. This doesn't mean a 50-50 split, though. The statute set a minimum of overnights for shared custody at 93, which is about 24% of your year. Let that sink in for a minute. 80% of the time, courts order the standard every other weekend for a parent. at which point the parent has been reduced to a visitor. You're not a parent anymore. It's very hard to maintain a healthy bond with your child when you see them every other weekend. Frequently, custodial parents make desperate attempts to remove the other parent from the life of a child, using tactics such as false allegations and relocation. I personally experienced both of those. This comes with a hefty price tag and elongated court battles, sometimes lasting over a decade. Equal shared parenting is often only the result of both parents deciding the experts are right and what is best for the child, not what the courts have deemed in the best interest, which actually happened in my case. The positive change in a child's life after 50-50 begins is noticeable, and it's almost immediate, and I can testify to that personally. Most modern psychology studies suggest that the best outcome for children is to maximize time with both mom and dad, if they are both fit parents. Yet, the statistics show that the court system does this about 20% of the time. Why is that? Which brings me to Title 4D of the Social Security Act. Section 458 of Title 4 is literally entitled Incentive Payments to States. So the states are incentivized to issue child support. That means they're incentivized to pick a winner and a loser, if you guys haven't been through that yourself. And I have, and it's not pleasant. According to the Office of Child Support Enforcement, states can earn up to 10% of the collections depending on their efficiency, but receive the minimum of 6% regardless of their effectiveness. So every state's making money on this. What this says to me is that the states are flat out paid to issue child support. The higher the child support, the more money the state gets. The more time a parent is without his or her child, the more money the other parent should receive in child support. This explains the antiquated child custody legislation and the unregulated systems used to monitor and implement such legislation. Why should this matter to you? Just check the statistics from the CDC about the effects of single-parent homes. Tired of mass shootings? According to the University of Michigan, a study found that 75% of examined adolescent murderers were from single-parent homes. The CDC states that 85% of children with behavioral disorders have only a mother in the home. Not to mention a lot of other horrible statistics regarding suicide, drug use, high school dropouts, teen pregnancy, and the list keeps going on and on and on. So this issue isn't about fathers or mothers. This is an issue about our children and our future.
Thank you. I just want our public participants to know that this commission can't deal with the child custody issue. We are
your child support, right, which goes hand in hand.
You know, yes, I understand that, and I certainly sympathize with a lot of your positions regarding the need to go closer.
Our laws are antiquated,
but unfortunately,
our kids need both parents.
No, I understand, but
period. And child support has a ton to do with that. That's why you guys pick custodial and non-custodial parents in a divorce court. You're not there to decide who gets the kids. That needs to stop. And child support enforcement is how the estates are incentivized, and that's why they do what they do. So it's directly related, and I'm just here to tell you that Title 4D reform needs to happen. That's why we're here. Okay. We're going to start checking in on states where they're spending the money. Okay. It's going to start happening.
It starts at the federal level, though, because we have to do what federal statutes and regulations ask us to do, and then we implement them. That doesn't mean we don't have some discretion within that, but it starts at the federal level as far as Title 4D is concerned. And also the incentive quotes, you talked about the pre-1998 incentive.
Well, that's what's listed on the Child Support Enforcement, their federal website. That's still listed there.
The current incentives, the program is about a $6 billion program, and there's a pot of about $550 million that goes to all 50 states plus 4 territories in DC. So we call it 54 4D jurisdictions, and it's split among them every year based on how they do on 5 performance measurements: paternity establishment, the rate of paternity establishment, the rate of support order establishment, the percentage of current support collected in a month, how many cases with arrears do we collect on within a year, and cost effectiveness. So those are the 5 measurements that are used today for that pot of $550 million. Colorado gets about 1% of that. And that's close to what our caseload is nationally too. So it represents generally about 12% of the budget of a child support program. There's federal financial participation, which represents 66% of cost reimbursement, and the rest are picked up in Colorado by the counties. In other states, it's picked up by the states or a combination of the states and counties. So I'm just giving you a little background.
Right. I mean, for me, I'd rather see states get incentivized to equal or to give out 50-50 equal parenting. We should be federally incentivizing states to do that.
No,
not issuing child support.
Okay. And again, you know, the Title 4D agency is only authorized to talk about the child support piece and not the custody piece.
Right.
Same with the commission. And I apologize.
And they're directly related, though, and you know why they are.
Yes,
so
yes, absolutely.
We don't have to argue about that. I get it.
And there's no argument, actually. Okay. Sir.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. Since time is the most valuable thing you can give anyone, I'm going to keep this brief and to the point. My name is Philly Slim. I'm a nationally recognized artist, advocate, business owner. I'm a father of two, but I'm a parent to none. See, my fight is for those men and women who are hanging themselves in their closet. I stand before you today grateful to be a father of two miracles I call children. The fact that I'm here today is a miracle. I've been a law-abiding citizen all my life until 2006 when I went through a high-conflict divorce. See, in my 12-year divorce journey, I've learned some really hard lessons. I was in and out of jail for 6 years in 5 different counties on false allegations, found negligent, but not by a jury of my peers, by a judge who I expected to remove their incentives, gender bias, from the equation and make an educated and accurate ruling based solely on the best interests of our children. Boy, was I mistaken. Instead, my children and I were drugged through the system 68 times in court in 1 year, $100,000 later, and at 16 hours a month parenting time issued, I was erased from my children's lives, minimized down to a visitor, and 60% of my income has been garnished. Anxiety, PTSD, thoughts of suicide at one point was my everyday life. At one point. What options are you leaving us parents with on child support, forcing us to get 2 jobs, rob, steal, or by any means survive? I'll never forget that one particular moment in court. Judge Arkin insisted I sell my car, take the bus, and move into my parents' basement if need be. See, every person on this commission is perpetuating for sole purpose gain and is not in the best interest of our children or our future generations. On November 29th, in your commission hearing last couple months ago, Judge Arkin's departing comment, it was immensely unforgivable. For 35 years, she's been a judge. And I asked Judge Arkin, how many families would you say you placed on a child support order knowing that personal gain was the motive and not the best interest of our children, crippling parents and destroying families in the process? I'm sure you're aware in your 35-year judgeship, since 1970, the suicide rate has increased more than 30% directly involved, like Mr. Combs said, through family court. See, 77 years ago today, the United States of America suffered great devastation. 2,403 servicemen, not women, servicemen, lost their lives in the Battle of Pearl Harbor 77 years ago today. Since 1999 till current, fathers are taking their lives at 50 per day. So let me ask you this in closing. Once you have crippled all the men in this country, reduced them down to visitors on a child support order, taken 60% of their income and labeled them all as deadbeats, empowering all the women, and completing the hidden agenda, what is next? Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. Thank you for your comments, and just a general statement. They're very much appreciated, as I mentioned before. Although child support is interconnected with custody and access and overnights and everything like that, it goes back to 1975 when the program started. It was really just a child support program. There have been attempts to actually add another part to Title IV of the Social Security Act for visitation, custody, etc., to have equalized federal opportunity, federal dollars flowing to the states to provide assistance in those situations as well.
Don't you think that's how it should be? I mean, the Constitution basically states that not only do the parents have that constitutional right, which is God-given, not by a government, but so do the kids.
Yes, I'm not saying, I'm not against that Congress passed that, but it hasn't passed yet. And so all I'm saying is that the funding has been all for child support, and there are some programs, there's $10 million available, and that's nothing compared to the $6 billion I mentioned, for visitation access grants around the country, et cetera. And a lot of states put in money for this too. But it is not balanced as far as the dollars put into it. And again, I apologize for the limitations of our ability to address all the issues that you raise. We have to do everything in the context of the Title 4D requirements of us at the federal level, required at the state level to implement, and then how we do that at the state level.
I was told by a person at HHS in Washington that we should apply for a waiver, saying that the state of Colorado believes that 4D and 4E funding attached to 4A funding constitutes, what did he say exactly? Constitutes imminent harm, and it costs our citizens more than what it brings in, which is very clear. We could simply apply for a waiver and have that conversation about waiving the 4D requirement in order to receive 4A funding. Because after all, this is a voluntary program. No one's making you do this.
On at 550, you said $550 billion, and you only
Million.
550 million is the incentive pool. 6 billion is the program nationwide.
And there's only 1% of Colorado that's receiving that.
No, based on our caseload, we're about 1% of the national caseload, and the incentive dollars and the cost and everything else. We're about 1%.
And I believe that's what Mr. Henry was saying, based on a sliding scale from if you're the least 6%, correct?
Yeah, it's based on the state's efficiency of collecting the child support. And they receive no less than the minimum of 6%, but no more than 10
It's
of the
actually
total
called
money
an entitlement. If Colorado wanted to spend a penny on child support, or wanted to spend $100 million on child support, it's whatever the state chooses to spend. The federal government is obligated to match the local dollars with federal dollars and whatever the state puts in. So it could put in as little as it can to meet the requirements of the program, so let's meet the requirements of the federal government regarding the program's operation, or it can put in more. So states vary around the country whether they put a lot of money into this program or they don't. But the federal government, because it's an quote-unquote entitlement, matches what the local government puts in, whether it's county or state. In fact, if the person found the right place for the meeting, we're going to have a federal official here to go over funding a little more. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. So at this point, I'd like to move on. And before I do that, though, I just want you to know we're at the end of a cycle where we're getting legislation ready. That we're starting a new cycle in January for anything that is open for consideration. So what we're trying to do right now is just dot the I's and cross the T's on what we've done. That doesn't mean starting next year, there can't be fresh looks at many different things. But at this point, we're at the end of our process for this legislative cycle. Any comments on how we need to approach the report to the Governor and General Assembly, which is a requirement of the Commission every 4 years? Did anybody have a chance to review the executive summary draft? If you have any comments, grammar, syntax, additions, subtractions, modifications, just let me know. I'll work on that. And Elise, are we getting a professional drafter for the rest of the report, or?
We should be. Larry hasn't said anything. We talked about budget for a couple other items, but we should be getting someone to help us finish this report, as well as getting all the other reports in one area so we can use them as future reference.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so in the report, I mean, you're obviously hearing a lot of frustration, and you know a lot of the frustration. You know a lot of the complaints and the problems. Is part of the summary, or executive summary, we're really calling out what we acknowledge to be still remaining issues around this arena. It is the acknowledgement of the problem as a whole, child abuse, the conflict that all this creates. It seems to be whitewashed and just passed by.
The way I see the report being written this time is mentioning what the public comments were about. Because, again, what the report's trying to do is explain the legislation at this point and what the commission has heard. So when it comes down to what the commission has heard, I think it's very fitting that we put in all the issues raised. And there's nothing wrong with that at all.
And more than footnotes?
Yeah, I mean, yes. But is it the central piece in the report? I would say no. Is it going to be mentioned? Yes, and there won't be a footnote.
And I just say, I mean, for Senator Crowder, it's just, we're tweaking language, we're closing little loopholes, and but what we have not done in any of this legislation, any of this proposed legislation, to be honest with you, I haven't read it much about, but participated in all the meetings, paid attention, is you're not achieving one iota of benefit for the children. You're not reducing the overall conflict in the system one iota. There's some nice little tweaks and other stuff, but you're not progressing your values to benefit for the child.
Are you saying that all we do is non-beneficial for the child?
Yes, you're hurting children.
I believe so. Yes, sir.
Well, if I may, sir?
Yes, please, sir.
I think what we're trying to do is, without a doubt, look at the best interest of the child.
Really? The best interest of the child is 50-50.
Excuse me, we're not here to be argumentative. We gave you your time to speak. It is his turn to speak. You had public comment. Please be respectful of our meeting.
And you're right about one thing. I'm not as knowledgeable on this as I should be, and that's an important factor. I'm trying to learn as I go. But I do know that in the state of Colorado, as well as the country, we do have a problem with divorces, and how do we look at the child's best interest? And to say that everything we do is not in that best interest, I'm not sure that I can agree with that.
I don't know if everything you're saying is doing right.
Well, no,
but I would say,
about it, I think that, and I understand your frustrations because we hear a lot about this out in the public. But I think that what really perked my attention on is the number of suicides.
This is such a major.
I can relate to what you're saying.
22 veterans a day kill themselves.
Title IV is important. I don't believe the state should be actually making money on this. I can agree with that completely. But I'm also saying that, with all the frustrations that we have, I think my intent is to look out for the best interest of that child. And I can understand where dads would have an issue with this because I'm a dad. But to say that everything we're doing is not in their best interest, I tend to question that.
It's an outcome issue. It's an outcome. Are we better off than 1970 or worse?
Well, we'd be better off if there were no divorces.
See, we've got to go on. We only have a 2-hour agenda,
but 60% of kids are born outside of wedlock. Marriage is history.
To a very brief comment, I know we've had a comment period, but we've got to move on. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask if any of these gentlemen wanted to have a separate meeting with you outside of today's meeting. Okay. Is that something that is a possible situation to maybe discuss some of their issues?
Yes, it would have to be publicly stated ahead of time that we're going to have a forum on this issue at a certain place and time, but that's certainly a good idea. And why don't we try to schedule something like that? If that's fine with you, because I hate the fact that you're so time limited today, and I know that you have a lot to say, and it's from the heart. It's not necessarily just an academic subject. You each personally have been involved in this, so I'll set up some public forum. Okay,
that'd be excellent.
I just wanted to say thank you to the center for holding yourself accountable and saying that you're not educated and you're trying to work on that. Thank you. That means a lot to me.
Okay, any other comments regarding the report to the governor and general assembly? Okay, now we're in the subject of outreach to low-income parents and other interested persons. I think setting up a forum is actually right on point there, so I appreciate that. And let me ask you all, is Denver metro area the best for that, or somewhere else?
I think so.
Okay. Denver itself, Arapahoe, Jefferson?
I'd say Denver's the best spot for it.
Okay. We'll do that. I appreciate that suggestion. Thank you very much. Okay. Senator Crowder, we're interested in gross versus net income use of guidelines?
Well, I think that what brought this about was some constituent complaints about, more so in the area of spousal support. So it's all set up on gross instead of net. And with your email and your, what you found out, that half the states set this up on a net instead of gross. And I just wanted to throw it out to the committee that maybe this would actually, I don't know if it will change anything per se, but I think it would should make people feel that they're accountable to the actual dollars that are spent. So I would like to see some type of change from the gross to the net.
Would you mind if that's the next cycle instead of the cycle that we're reviewing today, since we're at the end of the line?
I don't mind, but I think if, I haven't seen the final bill aspect of it, but if it could fit into that, I think I would like to, get the board's opinion on that and see about the advantages versus disadvantages, and see if we can't move forward with something that will.
Any discussion on that topic of gross versus net?
I'm open to us having some more discussion, but I think we just need to do a rapid comparison to see what that would look like, and we would have to get Jane some numbers really fast if it were to be considered in this particular cycle.
Well, the thing about it, I may throw out that this bill could not be heard. It will be heard early, but we could actually, move it to March or February even, to give time to see if it would be viable solution to an issue.
And the net effect would just be lowering down on the.
Not necessarily, because if you look at the states with the net income versus gross income, they have different percentages based on net income than the gross income states. So it's not necessarily true. It could be true, but it's not necessarily true that net income results in a lower order than the gross income state. Because especially you're looking at both parents, and there are a few states that just look at the non-custodial parents, and I'm sorry for using the word, parent without majority custody times income. States like Texas, Illinois is switching, but they've been that way. They only look at the non-majority time parents' income, but most states look at both parents' income. So that factors in all this as well.
I was gonna say, I'd be interested in that. I know in court that is a common comment that's not even close to what I take home.
More accurate description of how the money is.
Right. I think people would feel better about that.
I think so, especially on the spousal support side.
Now, we look at adjusted gross income, so there are some deductions for like business and so forth. So it's not like 100% just gross, but you're right. It's certainly worth a look. So
and this year is going to be a real big change anyway because of the new tax laws and what really is allowed to be deducted and what's not allowed to be deducted, and so that gross and net's really going to be in flux. This.
Timing might be pretty good.
Is Jane participating today?
She wasn't sure if she'd be able to make it. She was in town, but wasn't sure if she'd be able to do it. Let's see, what was I going to say? The tax bill of 2017 changed alimony, spousal support maintenance from something that is deductible to the payer and income to the payee to a tax neutral event, just like child support. And that goes into effect starting January 1 of 2019. So there are some ramifications there for sure, because a lot of people use that as negotiation tools as far as how much the maintenance should be. So any thoughts on how we should proceed with net versus gross discussion going forward?
I'm willing to do the comparison because you indicated the percentage of states that use gross versus net, and I'm willing to look at that as hopefully as quickly as I can to compare what their language is when they actually calculate gross and what they consider as net. I think the second piece is if we have an accountant that any of us can reach out to get that assessment of what that new tax bill is going to look like in reference to if you're looking at net versus if you're looking at gross, what would that do? Because I think that tax imposition as of 2019 is going to be huge. Just like all charity is down this month because that's no longer a deduction. So I think we need to look at the accounting, and then I think we need to get Jane's perspective on what that would have impact. So to me, those are the three key elements to consider first and foremost.
Also, Megan McCann from the National Conference of State Legislatures. I just contacted her earlier this week, but and she was busy, couldn't be here today. But she's offered to look into the issue also. So,
Jeff, are we really looking at adjusted gross and adjusted net if we're still going to give credit for things like who's paying for medical, who's paying for childcare?
Well, I mean, that's
extracurricular.
I mean, that's part of the discussion, I guess. But, I would think at first you'd want to limit it to post-tax and post-mandatory deductions, just like a Consumer Credit Protection Act net income, which is subtracting federal, state, and local taxes and mandatory union obligations. Those are those CCPA deductions. And I think some states follow that when they do their net, but we'll have to look at it more carefully. But that's basically the starting point of net versus gross. Okay, so we'll look into this issue, and we'll bring it up in January then. Tracy Graham was supposed to be here from the federal government. I'm not sure if he got any of the emails that we've changed our office location.
There was somebody in that room that's going to be there all day, so there was somebody to tell them to come over here. So if anybody did show up over there, they would.
I think you asked the front desk, and the front desk knew nothing.
I got up to the room and there was somebody there. Yeah, because they're actually set up for
they're doing exams.
Yeah. She knew exactly.
Jeff will check and see.
Jeff, I'm gonna go down and check with security and see if he has checked into the building.
Okay.
And if so, I'll try to find him and bring him here.
Thank you, Robert. I appreciate that. Okay. So why don't we skip past his presentation for now, and let's go to the draft's final language. Robert leaves, right? So did you all get the version that I sent out yesterday that had some comments on it, so you knew what each section was going to be about?
Yes.
Okay. So what do you think about adding the definition of complex physical care? And that was a Robert addition, so maybe we need to come back to that one when Robert's here.
Okay, so that's brand new. I was
Yeah, that's brand new.
Okay.
No, Robert added that one.
And I would leave that to the attorneys that have to dispute that in court if you run into that frequently or not. Do you feel there is a need for such a definition?
And is this for the retroactive modification piece of it, or what was?
I think I read it as it's basically solidifying qualm in statute.
Okay.
Is how I read it. I don't know if Robert intended something different.
And I didn't know. I mean, I don't have a lot of
I don't think
issues.
it's come up with that.
And that's just when you have children in the same family having multiple schedules, maybe 50-50 on one child and whatever is going on. They average the overnights for this case in marriage of qualm. I haven't had that issue come up a lot. I have had the issue as to whether you have the benefit of retroactive modification under change of physical care.
Which I think they addressed that.
That's what I was thinking. They were that has come up.
I don't think this addresses that. Like I had my note was doesn't qualm case cover it pretty clearly. I don't think there's issues.
So there may be an issue with some courts maybe not following the qualm rule or something. Is that
not
where this came from?
And the other piece is I think the private bar would have a lot to say.
Okay.
Potentially about defining it.
Okay, we'll come back and ask Robert to explain, but for now, maybe, we're looking at perhaps dropping it, but we'll see what Robert says. Okay. What about the definition for mandatory school fees?
Why? I mean, my position was when it came down to it, I just didn't know that this would be necessary. But I guess because it's still under the section that allows it by, isn't it court order agreement of the parties, that I'm fine with it. I think
it can't be self-imposed.
Right.
He's not checked in, and the guard knows him, and will send him directly up here if and when he does check in.
Appreciate it. Could you explain the inclusion of complex physical care definition?
Yes. So in Colorado, we have 4 different types of physical care arrangements. A complex physical care arrangement by case law is defined when there are 2 or more children involved in a child support case. One parent is the primary caretaker of all of those children, but the obligor or NCP has a different number of overnights with 3 children. And what the case law has said, you basically look at each child, how many overnights does the parent have with each child? You add up all the overnights, divide by the number of children to determine an overall average for all of the children. And then that is used to determine whether it's a worksheet A or worksheet B. That's it.
Okay.
I guess our thought was it's in my marriage of qualm, and I just haven't seen so you just want to codify that.
Well, if we were looking at making changes with the S-curve of radically changing the shared physical care, and the APA and Judicial Task Group had made this recommendation before. It was the only type of physical care arrangement that was not defined in statute and just defined in case law, that maybe at the same time we should go ahead and consider codifying in line with the Quam case and the other cases that flow from that. That was basically the motivation there.
I don't see a problem with it. I just didn't know if it was necessary. But if you're saying just to be consistent with all the other definitions.
Did you think the private bar would have an issue with it or something? Somebody mentioned that it might be something that might not receive their approval, or if it codifies Quam exactly.
I guess you never know.
Yeah, but it does codify Quam.
Mm-hmm.
So, does everyone want to retain it in our proposed legislation?
Not object to it, I guess.
Can we ask a question? Sorry.
Yes.
Why might that occur? Why might a parent have different overnights with their children if they're all the same family? Why
It
would
could
they
be a
have different-
teenager
Yeah, I've seen that with
may
teenagers.
have only weekends, whereas if you have youngers
Or a newborn child.
or a newborn child, then newborn child you might see every other day, whereas an elementary age child you may see on a weekend and a couple days during the week.
Okay.
So they, because of the age usually of the children.
Okay.
It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen in some cases.
Okay.
I think we would, it talks about the obligor. And I think we would not want to specify. I think it's the parties have different overnights.
Yeah, we've gotten rid of that.
So you would say parties?
Well, that leads to another issue
Yeah,
because it talks about parents in the definitions, which has been strictly interpreted, I think, by some. But I think it could be parties. I think parties is better because that opens it up if grandma has.
It's a non-custodial party. I didn't know what title would be appropriate there. But it wouldn't apply like if there's two children and mom has majority of time with one child and dad has majority of time with the other child. That would be a split physical care as defined by statute. So really it only applies when there's two or more children with one parent and then the other parent has a different number of overnights for each of those children that you have to come up with the average.
It might be more of a multiple schedule physical care or something to that effect. I don't know that complex is.
Well, that's the term that Quam used in the cases that followed Quam. Is why I use that. I don't care what label we call it. That's just I was using the terminology that Quam used.
And this is a definition that came out of Quam, or did you make this definition?
It's reworded a little bit, but it's essentially the same thing.
Do we have a substitution for obligor that we want to use?
I was wondering if there's something.
The only one I can think of is non-custodial.
Parent without majority.
X3.
Well, they just talk about, the other definitions say each parent has physical care of at least one child, each parent keeps the children overnight for more than 92. So I think it's more parent or parties.
Right. So the parent with less than 183 overnights? I mean, I was trying to not make it wordy at the same time.
Well, we just say the parties have different number of overnights with two or more of the children.
We could, I think that meaning would still be the same. The intent of the commission would be to codify Quam, and we could reflect that in our report in case courts wanted to look at what we were trying to do.
Sure. Okay. Let's move on to section 2, imputed income. And that's where we list the federal regulatory requirements before we can impute income. There are 14 factors to look at. Any feedback on that one? Okay, let's go to the next one. The tender years.
Been in court on this one, we didn't include the number breakdown that we had wanted to add there. That was part of it, just to sort of make that flow a little better.
I'm sorry, where's that?
On the tender years.
The number breakdown?
Yeah, so I just brought an example to show you, and I can pass it on if you need to. But it was just we numbered each section to make it flow a little better.
Sure. So basically, Laura's saying that just break it out with numbering.
And that was what was passed out last time.
Yeah. So I'll add that.
So that was what was approved last time.
Oh, instead of using or, have a 1 and 2.
Yeah, it was 1, 2, 3,
No,
and just so that flows a little better. It's broken up. And I think the language was incarcerated in that sentence that we approved last time.
That's correct.
Yes, that's consistent with the new language.
Right.
Because in a felony case, you could be incarcerated for a long time before you're
Right. Yeah, we just.
Post-secondary education, any comments on that section?
And that was how we approved it last time.
Okay, now we get to the big one. The self-support reserve goes from $1,100 to $1,500. The minimum order goes to $10 from $50 for people who earn under $650 per month. Then it's $50 up to $1,500, plus $20 for each additional child, up to 6 additional children, or 6 children. And then the curve, the self-support reserve is embedded in the remainder of the schedule going forward. I sent you Jane's calculation. You may have gotten that as well. That shows the amendments to the schedule based on these changes. You know, it's pretty hard to know without using a worksheet calculator whether, you know, these are all accurate for you right now. If there are any outcomes that you think are peculiar or anything like that. But I would ask that as we debate the net versus gross and get this finalized, why don't you also try to play with this to make sure that we have a rock solid schedule that reflects the changes that we wanted to make.
And how we would state this in text in the statute, or are you contemplating simply saying, use this schedule? In other words, you know, we talked about on the worksheet of having an adjusted gross income determination and then subtracting 1,500. But what I think I'm saying is a gradual phase in from one up to $1,500, depending on where the adjusted gross income falls. And that's what I was wrestling with, Jeff, on that.
At 1501, it's a $50 order still with whatever that next block is for, you're looking at an $85 order for up to 1550. Okay, so it really starts with a $50 order and goes up from there until it melds into the old schedule.
So it wouldn't be $288 at $1,550.
That is correct. We're looking at what we're trying to do is put in a self-support reserve for people who earn under $1,500 per month, so that there's a minimal child support obligation.
Under $1,500.
And then once you go above $1,500, you don't just start with a giant jump. We try to smooth out that as the incomes get higher.
Okay.
So the next level is $85, not the minimum wage amount or anything like that.
I would appreciate some help in drafting that for statute. Because we're going to have to also be able to do guideline calculations manually without the computer program. So, and that's what I've been struggling with, everybody. So,
and I amended I put in language that amended the current statute just to put in the new numbers, but that basically it's not really changing what was in the old schedule, because there was an 1,100 self-support reserve, so that
it was built into the schedule. That
yes.
was how we did that.
That's right.
This is now a line item on the worksheet, unless I'm misunderstanding.
Under 1,500, you've got two choices. You got the $10 order and the 50, etc. order. Above that, you're phasing out the self-support reserve over much higher combined income. So you have an $85 order if your income is at $1,525. And then, you look at the schedule, it goes up to $120 and $1,600. But we're no longer looking at the minimum wage order at that point. So it's a lower order that we're looking at.
I just would like to work with more on how we put this in statute in words, and then how it would actually work on the worksheet. That's what I would like.
Any additional thoughts on the language in this section? What do you think about including the S-curve formula in the statute? I know some people didn't like that, some people liked it.
I wonder, it looks like Oregon included it in their statute. So if a manual calculation is needed to be done and someone could actually figure out what that means, they could theoretically run a manual calculation.
And then we have the schedule too, so yeah.
But does the table actually do the same thing?
Yes. And it rounds, what we're trying to do is round it to the nearest dollar, and I know you had concern about that.
I guess I had a question about, it's listed as G in the summary, and then it's in 3 about the 92
default APA.
Yeah.
Where did that come
where that came from, trying to put something in there. If you're an APA tech, what do you do if there's no evidence? I don't think, you know,
And no agreement.
no agreement, nothing presented to you that to indicate overnights, either what people want to do or have been doing. There's just no evidence whatsoever. It's like a default APA. That it would be at that point a reduction of 13.45%, and it would be a de novo hearing if someone comes, wait a minute, I want 50-50 custody, so I'm not going for this, or Your Honor, the person moved to Antarctica and has no chance of this. You know, whatever the situation is, it can be adjusted de novo without having to prove a substantial change in circumstances.
And is that then why it's in why 5? It's like I talks about if your parenting time order is updated, then you can update without a 10% change.
Yes, although you do need the 10% change after the initials, after the final order is set. So after the APA order is not appealed, then you would have to show the 10%. If the APA is appealed de novo, you can bring it up then. A court hearing is a court hearing, and then once that order is entered, then you'd have to show the 10% change in the child support amount based on the change in the overnights, plus any other changes that may impact the 10% change.
But if there's just no agreement and it goes to court, this isn't what this section's talking about. You're talking about default orders, right?
For the 92, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. If it goes to court, the court makes its own determination. Any other thoughts about that?
I just think it's to the benefit, I mean, especially for the audience members that are having concerns about parenting time and that type of thing. I think the S-curve helps eliminate some of that, and then it also prorates appropriately based on the number, actual number. So instead of everybody saying, oh, it has to be 92 or less than 92, if all of a sudden it's 97 or it's 102, at least that's calculated in and there's some relevance given to it rather than trying to ignore or trying to minimize what that might be.
So we're trying to avoid the cliff effect where there's a magic number, 93 overnights, and all of a sudden your child support's reduced. And we're saying every overnight counts incrementally toward a reduction in child support. And it's based on an Oregon S-curve where it was formulated to show that the incremental or marginal cost of overnights for a parent. You know, if you only have one overnight, you're probably not having an extra bedroom. You know, maybe you're just going to McDonald's or something, so the cost is minimal. At a certain point, you have that extra bedroom if you can afford it. You
with your child support.
Yeah. But what they were doing is looking at the incremental increase in cost as parents start coming closer to equal sharing time. And when you hit the 182, then it's 50%. So that's what we were trying to accomplish with the S-curve, to reflect reality, because agreements change. People move out of state, and you have summers with a kid versus every other weekend or whatever. You know, it varies family to family. So we don't think one size fits all. That's why we did this. Any other thoughts about this section?
We're still on subsection 1, right? Parens 1. Are we discussing all of this?
You can discuss all of the one that is 14, 10, 115, 6, and 7.
Okay. If I can just kind of summarize some feedback I gave to you, Jeff, for the benefit of the community stuff. I support the S-curve 100%. I have no problem with that, and hoping to avoid the litigation over the 92 versus 93 overnights issues. On subsection 2, where it talks about where there is no likely overnights. If there is some overnight care likely, the court will determine appropriate numbers. Are we saying that the court can make a determination on overnights over what may happen, or can they still only do it upon what has happened?
The court, again, there's two things. One is parenting time, actual parenting time. That is a separate procedure, although, you know, in a DR case, it can be the same procedure. I'm just talking about when you're before the magistrate and they come in to deal with the child support issues. The way we're looking at parenting time for this is only for the purpose of child support. So it's completely dependent on any other court order, agreement by the parties, evidence presented to the court of visitation, either what has been done to date or what is the intention of both parties regarding visitation, that is a likely visitation pattern going forward. But it's up to the court to make that decision for the child support purpose. Okay. Again, that's in a 4D world where our guidelines look at overnights impacting child support. The better thing to do is to have a parenting plan in place, whether it's 50-50 or it isn't, to have that used by the court for the child support determination. But as you well know, especially in non-marital cases, we don't get those first all the time.
So when we say court, we're also including administrative process.
Yes. And that's where you come up with the default.
Okay, we'll get to that in a second. But okay, so when you say likely to be exercised, would be a situation where there's been a recent separation, not a really history of overnights that we can go by, maybe a recent birth of a child, a newborn, when there's not a track record, that if there's a parenting time order that establishes whatever, that would be some evidence that either the court or APA could use. And there is case law out there where I think the Supreme Court has said that when in the absence of other evidence, that we're going to assume they're going to follow a parenting time order.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to clarify that.
If there's any evidence, the problem is when there's no evidence presented and there's silence regarding any past or current or future intention of exercising visitation, what should the court do? Because it would be unfair to the paying parent if we said 0 overnights, right?
Well, in the examples I just gave, I understand what you're saying. And we're saying that there would be a parenting time order that gives the parent with less time with the child, maybe 120 overnights. The child's 2 months old, and there really hasn't been much of a track record yet. I have no problem in either the court or administrative process following that. And then later on, if reality is different, we could always do a mod on that. I agree with that. I would just clarify that it's not only the court, but we can do this administratively as well on subsection 2. Otherwise, I think I understand what the intent is here, and I think it'd be good to clarify that in our report so that there's some directions for the courts that would be interpreting and applying this.
Absolutely.
And all of that. So,
yeah.
does that make myself clear?
Any parenting plan agreement or order from the court should take precedence over what we do with the overnights.
But you're using the most recent order even if the overnights aren't being exercised until they go in and get a modification?
You know, until there is a modification, I think you have to go with the order. We're not there to enforce or interpret what's going on in that order. So the overnights are the overnights based on what the parents agreed to or the court ordered. And that's what I'd say we should use for child support until there's a change in the parenting time order. If there's a change that does result in, a 10% change in the child support, then we need to reflect that in our order.
How can the language also reflect just the flexibility of changing overnights? So again, kind of a range of time. I mean, so moving away from actual and from counting, but just allowing for parents because circumstances change or things need to.
Sure.
So to make it easier for the kid to stay with mom one night versus dad that night because dad's out of town, and to remove the conflict of fighting over the individual.
Usually there's language that says it has to be consistent change. So like if you're just doing something on a temporary and just doing it, just remains what it is.
But
so
I guess what I'm suggesting again in the language in this context, again, take the focus off of counting the overnights and to allow for the couples to have more flexibility. So we're not running back to change one overnight. So
no, but you wouldn't do that, and that's one of the reasons why we're trying. Well, okay, I'm not saying there aren't people in this world that would argue over $2 or whatever, but.
And you can't eliminate that. I'm going to tell you right now, from the judicial perspective, they are working and trying to eliminate some of that, because there are just some people that in their mind, they're there to cause grief, and they're going to file paperwork, and file paperwork. And that is a totally different topic than what we're dealing with here today. So the best we can do is when you have rational parents that are really trying to do the best they can for their child, you put in language that says, basically, until there is a consistent change, you don't modify. It is what it is.
Right. And
they can go back and forth. Parents are able to make those choices.
That. That's just why you don't want it. You want parents to be able to do that on their own without us legislating.
And Jeff, there's a question.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Doesn't that conflict with the tender years doctrine? Because I mean, if a child's 2 months old, obviously the surrogate mother breastfeeding certain things that's where I think Carl, thank you. That's what I think Carl's kind of saying is that, sometimes you can't really bounce it and base it off of an overnight, because a child had, with breastfeeding and certain things that a mother can provide that a father cannot at that young age. And I believe that's where, isn't that the conflict between?
But the 10-year doctrine is debunked by every social scientist. Children need both parents at every age.
But they brought up tender years earlier.
I understand they brought it up earlier. It's debunked science, just like believing in the flat earth.
Yeah, unfortunately, gentlemen, this isn't time for the two of you to debate. We need to move on with our meeting. Sorry.
And I'm just going to say, like, if your parenting time agreement has flexibility of 120 to 130 overnights, I would argue, let's use 125 for the purpose of child support calculation. So there's still the flexibility for you to go from 120 to 130. That's not going to affect anything. But for the purpose of the calculation of the child support amount, we'd use 125 overnights. So otherwise, you're going to have a fluctuating child support order on an actual use basis, which is a very hard thing to manage. If every month there's a different child support amount. Yeah.
Does your new legislation, does it include what the state's policy is regarding interest on arrears?
No, but next year we plan to take up the fact that that we are not going to have added interest for child support purposes, that it would be just the judgment interest is what we're looking at for next year. However, you should know that in Colorado, I don't believe there's any county that does interest on child support as a child support agency. Parents have the right to go to court to try to get a judgment and interest. Other states require interest in their calculations. So if we're enforcing a California order, that has interest in it, and we enforce that. But a Colorado order doesn't come with interest.
So if my attorney told me that they charged me weekly compounding interest on my arrears that have been paid off for 7 years, she lied to me? Because she told me it was a state statute. Because I said, either I want a credit for my money or I want my money back.
Okay.
And the state's answer was, we're going to charge you compounding interest weekly.
Well, okay. Well,
So I'm just curious, what's the law? What's the law?
The law says that it's available. It's available, but it doesn't have to be applied. It's available.
Only if I want my money back, then the state can apply it, I guess.
Okay.
Because they never ordered it.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to get it straight. Like, what is the law?
Here's a very specific instance. Can we address it afterwards? I'll be happy to look at what county it is and get all of your information.
Absolutely.
But again, your specific information doesn't relate to the whole.
Sure.
But I'll be happy to get
Well, I mean, I think the question is relevant.
It's statutory allowed. It's statutory allowed.
Okay. But it isn't law.
So the judge, it is. It's in the statute. The judge can apply it if they so choose.
Okay, if the judge didn't, and then they want to do that retroactively.
Again, we'd have to look at what your specific situation is.
I'm just curious as to what
the
law states.
The law allows for it.
Right, and a private case is different from the ones that are handled by the child support agencies too.
So you're talking family support registry?
No.
Well, no, that's just where you
Family
make
support
that
registry is an accounting department that processes money.
They don't
Child
enforce, they
support
don't
services
contract,
is
they
a
don't.
different
Don't
entity.
collect the interest.
Yep.
And it's not something we want to do. That's just where
Right.
you
The
make
judge
money.
didn't order it. The state didn't collect it. Years went by. Now all of a sudden they're charging me interest on arrears that have already been paid
You
off.
have to look it up.
So I'm just curious what the law is because I feel like the state kept my money, and I think
That's why
my
I said,
child would be
we're
better
willing
well
to look
served
at
if
it, but
I
it's-
had my money.
The law says they can do it. So it's just, we need to look at your specific situation and see where it happens.
And we're gonna have to look at your orders specifically as well as the statute in your situation, so.
Okay, I appreciate you taking the time to answer that just because, that's one of the main reasons I came here because I want to know what the law is.
Yeah.
Because it seemed a little fishy to me.
And about 2/3 of the child support cases in the state are, the child support agency has a role in establishing and enforcing the order. A third are all private, and the child support agency doesn't have anything to do with it. It's just private attorneys or pro se parties dealing with it. So sometimes you have different outcomes in the non-child support agency cases. Okay. And money can be paid through the family support registry, whether it's a child support agency case or a non-child support agency case.
Right. Which is what I do.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Any other discussions regarding the section?
I was just going to give my quick comments to the rest of your sections, and if I could. Okay, so subsection 2 we've already discussed. Subsection 3, I gave some feedback. I didn't like a rule that was different for APA versus court. So this entire subsection 3, as I said, I don't support, as well as the component parts of it, including the default overnights. Subsection 5, my feedback was also concern about, it talks about circumstances after the date of the court hearing. I think what we were trying to do is that if things change later, we can always do a mod. Is that what the upshot of that was? Because that's already written in statute.
Yeah, but we're trying to do it in the context of this, where there is an automatic modification if, in an APA case, if it's set at 92 as default, then when there's evidence at the court hearing that it's 182 days or 20 days, that can change the order to reflect that amount. If it's a court order, it's a court order. And as you said, you have to go through the modification procedures to see if any change in overnights impacts the amount of child support. And that would be true after the APA order is finalized by the court, after an opportunity for the parents to bring up the actual number of overnights. Okay?
Okay, all right. And then the last on subparagraph parens 5, it looked like it said a parenting time or custody order results in a change of the parenting time. It can lead to a motion to modify the child support order without having to meet that 10% threshold in 1410-122 parens 5. So if that's the only component that has changed, then 1410-122 criteria would not apply. Am I understanding this correctly?
Yes, this applies only to the APA. The fact that
5.2.
Mm-hmm.
So 3, 4, and 5 are all only on APA
No,
cases?
4 says subject to 5 below, which is APA. All other parent types. So again, the intention of this is the court makes a determination, the court makes a determination. In an APA case, if there's no evidence, and I mean no evidence, no order, no parenting time agreement, blah, 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 no parent speaking to at the child support conference about overnights or anything.
No evidence of overnights, okay.
92, which can be appealed de novo to the court so that you can argue, no, my number of overnights is really 153. And that should be the number used for child support calculation purposes.
Okay, all right.
And that's the only thing I was trying to do there. Let me know if based on that, the language still needs to be tweaked, and I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, in closing, I think this needs to be vetted more.
Okay.
Really, the different rules for APA, judicial, a default 92, all of that, I think needs to be vetted more before we change.
We have different rules for the APA, let's face it.
No, we do. I mean, we just went through and updated the APA statute substantially this year. And it concerns me about the de novo language when we've already talked about with a judicial review and changed all of that this year that's going to go into effect next year. So I'm just, giving you my opinion, and I just think that all of this should be vetted further before we change any statute. And I'm willing to answer any questions and discuss further with anybody on any of this. I take this very seriously, and I'll support the S curve. I just think some things need to be looked at more before we do anything. So that being said,
and I welcome input from everyone on this, so that when we review it again, we have any language improvements necessary, or we throw this concept out again. Okay, so please review it closely. Anything else regarding that section? Let's go on to mandatory school fees. One was the definition of mandatory school fees. This is the section where it's an extraordinary adjustment, and that is, the word public should be in there, right? Everyone felt the word public should be in there? Mm-hmm. Okay. The next one is Social Security, disability, and retirement benefits. If a paying parent receives Social Security disability benefits, there must be information given to all the parties that he or she is receiving that benefit. Then the custodial or the other parent must apply for dependence benefits, because those dependence benefits offset the amount of child support. So if the child support is $600 and the benefit is $400, then if the benefits are applied and received, then the child support is reduced to $200. And what happens oftentimes is parents don't know that one parent is receiving disability, and then you have the problem of parents not applying for the dependence benefits, which would offset the child support. So we want to make sure parents apply for the offsetting benefits. Okay, good. Any questions?
And this is the same thing that was approved.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then I have a copy of the verified entry of support judgment language there. And then the next one.
And we didn't approve that one. The next one.
9?
Right.
Yes. This was the one that was a leftover from the former commission, apparently. That
Well, it was the one that was requested by
Christina Eigel back in the day.
Well, no, the reason I looked
Oh,
at
the
this
Garfield County.
Yeah, the Garfield County.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
That
yeah.
was
Okay.
why
thought
it
we
was-
disposed of that.
I did too. Yeah, we looked at doing something to talk about her concern, and then it was decided that really wasn't a concern
Right.
that she needed to be worried about.
Because they don't have.
And when it was open,
Right,
then we tried to get into that whole idea, and this is what I was talking about earlier, of when do you get that retroactive application of a modification, and no one really, I think it just made it more of a mess.
So let's take it out. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that was
Is
what was
everyone
decided.
in agreement?
Yes.
We'll take out that.
That's what we had previously.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last one is the SSN numbers, well, before the parenting time credit one. So that's just not having Social Security numbers on publicly accessed documents. And then the last one is the table for parenting time credit, which goes by overnights from 1 to 182.5, which would be 50% at that point.
and you would just put the whole table in the statute as you
Yes.
said, in an appropriate spot.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
That is correct.
All right.
So just a question on Social Security, just going back.
Sure.
Is there a timeliness for it? I know on here it says it has to be kind of timely, maybe application. Did we ever throw
I
that?
think we.
I noticed it's not in here. In here it says sort of timely.
Look at the California legislation.
They had 60 days. I think we
We had 60
actually had
days, within
30.
60 days of receiving such benefits.
Yeah,
That's what I
so the
missed.
notification has to be done within 60 days, and then we didn't want to put a time limit on the application because we weren't sure
Right, that can
of
take
that
years.
process, and
And the appeals and all that.
so
Oh, it's for the 6. Okay, got it.
so we kind of left it more open for court discretion.
Okay, so that's.
If the
I thought the 60 days was just notifying. I didn't realize in this
That's what I was
sense
thinking.
that it was an app. That's the
60
way I
is
read that.
notifying. 60 days
So within
is
60 days, you have an affirmative duty to notify
Yes.
the other parties.
that
But
you're
what
getting the benefit.
doesn't there need to be something about
The application should be made
application?
within.
Right, exactly. Because that could mean that if you don't apply for a year, you're just notifying
Yeah.
them after a year, If you don't apply for a year, it's 60 days. That's the way I would read that.
So what would you recommend as a time frame?
30 to 60 days. 30 is a little tight. Trying to get into Social Security offices sometimes, or you do application by phone. I think application needs to be made within 60 days. Or
so once notified, application should be made within 60 days. Okay.
The tricky part with Social Security is you call to get an interview, and that can take a while. And that's almost your.
But we want that affirmative step taken within 60
that's what I'm thinking.
days.
Yeah.
So it could drag on. You got 60 days, and maybe another 60 days before you actually get the money.
Right.
So you're looking at half a year. Yeah. And now, how would that be treated retroactively if you get a dependent benefit lump sum?
Usually Social Security pays that back.
Right, no, under the statute,
You get the credit.
Currently the credit is applied,
Both prospectively and if there's an arrears, if there's a lump sum, it can be applied to the
so it'll be
arrears
applied retroactively.
or the retro, either one.
Yeah.
We did that back in 2014.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Okay, good.
And would that be for, I know it says non-custodial, but couldn't it be for custodial?
It's for either parent.
Yep.
Well, the offset, this was to deal with the offset. There's no
Okay.
offset.
And they treat it differently, depending on who's getting who the
Where
benefit
it goes
flows
on the
through.
guideline.
The CP versus the NCP.
But it's either parent should seek the benefit.
But I
And
definitely
it can
agree.
go both ways, in my opinion.
Now, does that apply for, sorry to interrupt, does that apply for the 60 days for the non-custodial parent to notify the custodial parent or vice versa? And then if that was applied?
I think it's to the agency. Both.
Oh, it's to the parties.
Parties,
So once
okay.
they have 60, I mean, yes, they should notify within 60 days of receiving such benefits. And then from there, whether they know or they don't know,
Exactly.
once they're notified that such benefits, then the spouse. So if it was you and I, and you know, and I find out, then you have the 60 days to get the benefits on behalf of
The NCP is motivated to tell because they're going to get the benefit of that payment. So it's usually not a problem with them going, I'm not going to tell anybody that my kid's getting a benefit.
The problem is more the custodial parent doesn't apply.
Right. That's the issue.
See, I've noticed the custodial parent is the one receiving those benefits, but not telling the non-custodial so that they can still claim
the full child
the
support.
full child support.
And that's why we have the disclosure, so that now that
It works both ways.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts about this package? I mean, we are going to come up with a net versus gross at the next meeting. We're going
If you
to
hide
review
that,
some of the other issues that we've discussed.
you would lose.
What other points or thoughts does anyone have on this packet? Does that work?
Looks good, Jeff. Good job.
Really? The meeting, because I don't think we have.
Yeah.
I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Yeah.
We already know that's going on. So.
Mr. Bonity, are you on the phone? Yeah.
Is there anyone on the phone?
It sounds like he's on another call.
Okay. He was going to bring up an amendment about how much information should be disclosed. In other words, we should have more information available to all the commissioners regarding what was brought up before, all the federal statistics and state statistics should be available so that everyone knows about the financing of the program, the where the money goes, etc. And so he was going to bring up an amendment to our bylaws regarding that. So,
What was the gentleman's name on the phone?
The original one was
Isaiah
McGregory from Venture Road.
Venture Road.
Instead of nonprofit, Venture Road.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how you spell that either. I don't
thought
know
it
if
was
it's
ROAD.
ADS is what I thought I heard, but I don't know what it is.
I thought that's what I thought, but I was trying. I was interested. I wanted to hear a little.
I was going to Google it later and see
Yes.
what it is.
So let me ask the public members first. When is a good time, first of all, days of the week and times? Because I know some of you took time off from work to be able to be here. So
if it's important enough, we're going to make it.
Right.
Well, if we have the opportunity, we'll work with you all on a schedule.
For you guys?
Yep.
Middle of the week is always
Late in the day.
Yeah,
or
let's do a
late
Wednesday or
early?
something.
Yeah, sure.
Wednesday, and what time of the day is better? Is it like 5 is better to do it as an evening thing?
5 would be great for me.
Okay.
What about you?
Yeah, evenings are always.
Jeff, I thought you were trying to schedule public briefings or.
We started out looking at that methodology, and then we decided to broadcast from our website more.
Right.
And so we were out west, and we had like 2 or 3 people. I mean, nothing like the number of people who attended this one. But again, we were in places like Durango and Grand Junction. So we didn't have great turnouts.
I think Brian and Philly and myself and quite a few others.
We'd be the first We'd be one of the first, if not the first day to do it.
It kind of comes out from this, and I think if we have more of a, we're trying to talk to the powers that be, right?
In our little subject matter, I just have to reinforce that.
No, but it is all tightly intertwined, and I think that there's. I'm trying from my app standpoint. I am.
It's bad a lot.
But it is.
The problem is there's no implementation. So what we're discussing here, to get each county judge to implement exactly what it states in the Colorado statute that's the thing is like the senator said, they are educated to a certain point. I don't mean that disrespectfully, but if you're just looking at, like, you know how criminal court goes or a DR case, if the judge is overwhelmed or frustrated, the very next client that judge takes is, you know what I mean, probably 9 times out of 10 going to get the ringer because the attorneys, they fill up the docket. You know what I mean? They're on things that, like you stated earlier, that people are just coming in and filing for no reason. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, we're just wasting court docket time, and some of these cases are like that, but the judges aren't aware of, in my opinion.
And I do feel like we're noise. We're just kind of noise as opposed to being heard. And it is, our audience.
I don't think that's the case at all.
A lot of times. Well, no, I think as a whole. I've been in this advocacy role for 6 years now, and trying to get to our legislators. And by the time we get that sympathetic ear, then the bar comes in and says, "No, this you can't do it this way." So you got that.
As an example, as Jim talked about social problems with suicide, and the veteran did too. I think that's something we need to somewhat focus on and see.
And I think that
see if we can.
I can give you mountains of data.
And
I can bring you mountains.
Sorry, but we can, and it is in right now. We continue to search for our arena.
Well, all I'm rebutting is what you're saying is more than noise. That's all I'm saying.
And I appreciate that. And we just need to be able to kind of move the ball down the field a little bit. And I mean, the whole taking a bite out of the elephant type thing. And we recognize that this ain't easy. And it is complex, and people are very passionate. And the suicides are a very real thing. And we all have different premises. I think that the best interest of the child is, as I said to you a moment ago, it's just a false banner. It protects a business model as opposed to what it is.
When we go to,
hold on, Ryan. From the standpoint of, so we are dealing with big public policy issues here, and outcomes are that suicides, fatherlessness. Researchers would say that family court and child support, creates a fatherless child every 30 seconds. And researchers would say that 25% of all crime in America is related to the failures of family court. So we got different threads of this, and so it's all tightly intertwined, where child support is at the very foundational issue of this.
Absolutely, it is.
When we come up with solutions, I don't mean any disrespect, but we get the bar that says who is trying to protect a business model, who says no, we won't support that, and then by and large, all of our stuff goes back to the wayside. And so it's challenging. I've been as respectful as I know in this forum, and I appreciate the respect that's been given to me.
Sure, very respectful.
And it is, but at times we have to kind of bitch and moan.
And that's why we're talking about the meeting in the evening.
And I think that's wonderful, and I hope that we can. I think again we've kind of missed our opportunity from this legislative session, but I hope that as we start up in January that we can get to more substantial changes. Because I do honestly feel that the changes that we're talking about in this election, it's not going to mean a hill of beans to anybody at the end of the day.
Well, Carl, I do think though the 92 overnights. I think Jeff proposing that. I think that's a huge step forward, and going towards this model that both parents have care with their children. And so I think that is something that comes out of.
I think the cliff effect versus the S curve. I think there's certainly some rationale and some benefit there. It's not the answer.
Yeah. I think it's a great step forward. I mean, you mentioned this is a huge public policy issue, and we take these steps forward so that we can start addressing the things that are being presented. And I think it was a great step forward.
Yeah, but there's just everything from moving from an income shares model to an expense shares model. And the technology allows for it these days, and we can dramatically reduce the court's dockets.
Again, and again, I just want us to look at what the federal law requirements are. And somebody had brought up waivers. You can ask the feds for waivers, but you have to show that you are at least as cost effective in what you do when you do the alternative to what's required by the federal government. So it's not that, that sounds like a good idea, we'll grant the waiver. You have to prove that it's more effective.
And what's more effective? I mean, the end result, because what we have here is we feed something in, and it goes around 35 loops, and it spits out, and we see disaster. And we've been doing this since 1970.
Right.
And this is not working. This is not next level thinking. This is not brilliant minds. We are Americans. I mean, seriously. We're Americans. Put people on the moon. This is not unsolvable. I understand we have to unroll it, and it's going to be slow and hard, but we need to unroll it.
Again, I'm just saying that we're in Denver and not in Washington, D.C., and a lot of the changes that you're looking for really have to start there.
Well, but they can start right here on a state level by introducing a 50-50 presumptive rebuttal.
Right.
That's gonna every dad that's in court, he's fighting for access. He's not a deadbeat. The guys that need to be paying child support don't show up to court. They don't show up to the birth. They don't show up to court. They're not fighting to be in their kids' lives. You can make a huge difference on a state level by introducing shared parenting legislation that gets implemented. You're going to benefit. If you guys want to help kids, that's going to help a tremendous amount of kids.
You don't have
I don't think child support's a bad thing. That's the rationale my lawyer just gave to me. Well, you want your money back, but don't you want to support your kid? She's with me 50% of the time. I do support my kid. And I overpaid by 10 grand. I didn't have a problem sending the state my money.
And why do you have to support your kid when both of you are above the poverty line?
But I have a problem when the state keeps that support money I sent for my kid. I have a problem with that. Give it back. I'd like to take my family on a vacation for once. I've been in the courts for 10 years. I spent $23,000 last year to modify a parenting plan and a child support agreement.
Okay.
That is absurd. Okay. My kids deserve that money, not lawyers or judges. This is America.
Okay, and we're part of America too. And
I hear
a lot of people don't disagree with a lot of things you're saying. So don't think that we're all 100% opposed to it.
We'd love to see
I think we all care about the children. I think everybody here cares about the children. I guarantee you, everybody in this room is here because they love children or they love their children. I understand that. I get it. My shtick is when we come out of the pig and the python, what's the result?
Well, and the biggest opposition to the said legislation I was talking about, it's the bar. And the reason is the federal funding. Every time. Everybody, if the psychology nowadays is saying, hey, the best interest of a child is to maximize time with mom and dad, then why, when we go to introduce this legislation, is the only argument we're talking about the money? Why don't the child's best interests matter when we're talking about that type of legislation?
It's just not the form for that.
Okay.
I hear you, but that is child's...
There's no
It's the
money
Title IV.
for the private bar regarding custody when it comes to federal dollars. There are no dollars that go to the private bar.
They get paid to fight.
They get paid to fight.
That's just it. I mean, and that's just true.
But why are we doing
In
this?
Scandinavia, only 2% of divorces go to court, period.
That.
And there's no alimony, and there's very little child support because everybody's on a 50-50.
We're dealing with the child support issues. Yeah. A lot of people here don't disagree with you on most of what you're saying with the custody issues and the access issues. So it's not like it's one or the other, okay?
Then let's lower the number and follow the Commodore report. I mean, I would challenge you to read it. We read for a living. Okay. I have multiple, countless degrees.
Please.
Read it.
I know, but, we're going to set up the forum and we'll address all this then. I am just trying to say, don't always ascribe evil to what we're trying to do here, too. That is not what we're trying to do.
Right.
No, and there's nobody making money on this, because what happens is that, again, the cost of running the program, 66% federal dollars, the incentive dollars equal about 12%, and it's reinvested to cover that 34% of county money. So basically, the counties put in about 22%, the incentives are 12%, and the feds put in the other 66%. So it's the cost of running the program.
I pay federal taxes.
Yes.
I pay federal taxes.
That's correct.
Okay? Up to 20% of my state's budget in Colorado comes from Social Security.
Title IV.
It's coming right through here. This is hand in glove.
No, I understand what you're saying about your taxes. All I'm saying is you don't find counties doing this to make money that's in excess of the cost of running the program, is what I'm trying to say.
Right. This is a jobs program for bureaucrats.
Well,
this is a jobs program. Come on.
It sure seems that
it seems that way to me.
In 1975, when the program created, it was originally to recoup welfare dollars.
Right.
In 1980, it was expanded to non-welfare cases. Right. Today, the welfare component is very small. In Colorado, we are the only state to pass through 100% of the money that would go to reimburse the state and counties and federal government to the family. This is the only state in the country for current support. And so, that's looked at as a positive thing, that the money's going to the families and not to pay the coffers of the county, state, and federal government.
I would agree with you on that wholeheartedly. I think some other states in our union has some real problems with that very issue. So it's not just,
Okay. So when, in January, is there a Wednesday?
After the 7th.
After the 7th of May, 14th, 21st, something like that? Sure. Okay, we'll post on our website a place and date and time. It looks like Wednesday at 5, but we'll get a place. Okay?
Outstanding. Thank you.
If you be so kind as just to send me the email, I'll make sure all these gentlemen get it.
Oh, sure.
I was going to say, that's why I sent the form around.
We got everyone's email.